Good morning, everybody. I'm Nicola Barrett, Chief Corporate Learning Officer at Emory Executive Education at Goizueta Business School. And welcome to our Business Over Breakfast webinar series. I'm glad to have you join us this morning. And so, greetings from LA. Nice to see you. That's early for you. So thank you for coming. Today, we're going to explore a new aspect of the emergence of AI, which is how to talk when a machine is listening. So corporate disclosure in the age of AI. It's a slightly different topic for us, but one that's really relevant. Annual report is more than a legal requirement for public companies. It provides an opportunity to communicate financial health, promote the culture and the brand, and engage with a full spectrum of stakeholders. How those readers process this wealth of information affects their perception of, and hence participation in, the business in significant ways. Warren Buffett's annual letters to Berkshire Hathaway shareholders feature memorable quotes like, "Be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. And when it's raining gold, reach for a bucket, not a thimble." These writings are crafted with a human audience in mind. However, what if the corporate filings are read by bots? It's been observed that machine readers motivate firms to structure filings in a format conducive to machine processing and to temper linguistic tones that may be unfavorably perceived by algorithms. This is just one example of how corporate finance decision-making has been adjusting with the integration of AI into the system. So what we're going to talk about today is that broad technological feedback effect on the financial system. Today, we are joined by Wei Jiang, Goizueta's Vice Dean for Faculty and Research, and the Asa Griggs Candler Professor of Finance at Emory University's Goizueta Business School. Wei is an impressive researcher, scholar, and teacher, and her main research interests lie in corporate governance, institutional investing, and technology. She holds senior roles in several corporate governance and corporate finance related institutions. She's published extensively in top economics, finance, and law journals, and received numerous awards for research excellence. I thought it might be interesting for you to hear about her path to academia, which I think is just intriguing. In 1995, she was asked at the last minute to be an interpreter for a keynote speech by Dr. Merton Miller, who was the 1990 Nobel laureate in economics. It was held in Shanghai, and because the assigned translator had trouble interpreting the economic jargon, she was asked to do the speech, to do the translation of the speech. During that speech, Dr. Miller said something, and Wei, in a low voice, asked him, "Are you sure you meant that the interest rate would go up instead of down?" Dr. Miller corrected his statement, and Wei translated. Afterward, he asked whether she had considered doing a PhD. And in 1996, the very next year, she joined the University of Chicago's PhD program in economics, and she was Dr. Miller's last PhD student. So it's sort of serendipitous, maybe a kind of a fluke that she's here with us today, but we're really grateful. Wei's going to spend the first sort of 35 minutes or so sharing her insights into this issue. Please post your questions into the Q&A or the chat, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. But before I hand over to Wei, if this is a topic that is of interest to you, if you're keen to understand how AI can either help your business or disrupt your business, then please explore the upcoming Leveraging AI for Business course, because that's exactly what it's intended to do. It's April 30th and May 1st. And one of the teams is going to put a link to that into the chat. Wei, thank you for sharing your insights today, and I'm looking forward to hearing all about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola, for the introduction, and very nice to see everybody here. I saw people from West Coast. I even see people from Rwanda. I really look forward to a chance that I can meet some of you in person. It's a great pleasure for me to be here. To have something that could be of potential interest to business executives is not only a motivation, but also a discipline for me to conduct my research in the over 2 decades of my tenure in university as a faculty member. Now, today I'm going to talk about an intriguing phenomenon about whether the fact the machine is processing our writing and speech should or could have changed the way we write and talk. And I think, looking at corporate exposure, disclosure is just a value, but we really can think about this feedback effect from technology, or think about this incessant mouse and cat game in a broad sense. And there will be many, many more interesting implications as well as follow-ups. So I want to give credit to my 3 collaborators at 3 different universities as we work on this project together. So Nicola already mentioned in her introduction that corporate disclosure is more than a legal requirement, but it is the primary value for corporations to communicate their financial health, their brand name, their culture, and is a way to engage a full spectrum of stakeholders, not just shareholders, but also potential shareholders, potential creditors, and customers, etc. Now, indeed, if you ask me who signified corporate America writing at its best, no doubt the crown will go to Warren Buffett. So every year, I think his goal is to write something that's memorable and quotable for the many, many years to come. So his famous quote, including "be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful." Now, I keep asking my students or friends, hey, now is it the moment that you should be fearful, or it should be a moment of greedy? Now, think about why would Warren Buffett spend so much time in composing the state-of-art disclosure? Now, because he has a very unique audience. So this is a stadium in Omaha when Berkshire Hathaway holds its annual shareholder meetings. Now, those words will strike a chord with this massive audience coming from, actually quite diverse background to resonate the wisdom that he meant to convey. But I must say, this is very unique. This is actually exception rather than the norm, because today the CEOs actually have to cater for a very, very different audience. Now, when we conduct this research, some readers will ask me, say, hey, Professor Jiang, are you sure this is actually happening? I say, no, of course, look at this 2020 article in Financial Times. So this is talk about a CEO from Man Group. And if you don't know, Man Group is one of the leading quant hedge fund or asset management company globally, and it's based in London. So the CEO the Man Group is known to be very tech sophisticated. They do a lot of technology applied AI related investment strategy. So it's not surprising that the CEO is also very wary of the potential checkup on him by the technology surveillance. So it was said that before he went to a press release, that he would double mixing his words to make sure that his words would be interpreted correctly or as intended, not only by human audience, but also by those bots surely would follow his talk. So we did some research, and Nicola earlier asked me, say, hey, do you know that how many of the SEC or regulatory filings these days are actually read by the bots? The answer is striking. It's actually over 90%. And it just this technology becomes so sophisticated and so powerful. They can just read files instantly that will take our human beings infinite amount of time. So very quickly, they would actually taking over. Now, the most recent data released by the SEC, now we trace by more recent data, but most recent data traced by the SEC, they say there's 1.5 billion unique requests on SEC filing website. It's called ADGAR. And SEC's own estimate is about 85% of the documents were by internet bots. And our estimation came very, very close. Okay. So if you think about if this is a reality, then should the public companies adjust the way they talk? Now they know that 85% of the time a file downloading could be by the bots. And most of the filings, when a bot download filing, they download in big batches, hundreds if not thousands. So it's very unlikely those downloads are actually read by human beings. So with the presumption is that the bots download the filings and the machines read it. Now, before we have natural language processing, NLP type of processing, but now we have LLM, large language model type of processing. So what we observe is that over the time, public companies have periodic IT upgrades, meaning from 1 year to the next year, their disclosure suddenly becomes more machine readable or more machine friendly. Now, later I'll give a little bit more detail what this means to be machine friendly. Then the second change we observe is that when there's established algorithm that characterized as the sentiment or tone of a writing from those standard natural language processing kits, then the companies also adjust so that their sentimental tone will not be interpreted by machine in a way that's inadvertent to themselves. Now, third, I think now more and more CEOs are seeking consultants and seeking professional help to make sure that their voice would be rated by machine favorably in their conference call and earnings call, etc. Okay. So let me first present on some data. Okay. So the data ended in 2017 because there was a privacy consideration by the SEC that they no longer release the IP address of the downloaders. Okay, a lot of downloaders, most of them, I suspect, they're asset management related. They want to conceal their identity, so they lobby the SEC that we can no longer access the IP address of everybody who download the file from the SEC website. But I think the data was already very informative. If by 2017 it's already close to 100%, we know it's close to 100%. Okay, so how do we track? Is that we track the downloader IP address. If the same address would download more than 50 unique companies on a single batch, we divide it as a bot. I think it's a very conservative definition because human beings are incapable of doing that. Okay, and then we will see that both the absolute number of downloads and the percentage of downloads is basically taking over. So we're no longer in the filing downloads. We're no longer in a human world. The machine absolutely took over. Now, if you see this chart, you might find it curious. Wow, what happened in 2016? Why there was a dip in the proportion of machine downloads? And I will tell you, 2016 was the founding and establishment of Robinhood. So that was the year when a large number of retail and individual investors flowing into the market on the Robinhood platform that claimed to be zero commission for individual trading. Of course, they earn the money elsewhere. So there was a exceptionally large volume of individual downloading from SEC that you see dent the number. So whenever I do research on this, when there's a clear explanation, I always marvel at how honest the data are. If something happened, you can actually observe this in data. Now, let's do a little bit of who and who, before they mask their identity in their lobby in 2017. So up to 2017, they look at the machine downloads, the top downloads. And again, this chart gives us a very, very informative breakdown. Renaissance Technology and Two Sigma are our analytical MBA and master students top design destination. They are the world leader of quantitative hedge funds. Then you see a couple of well-known hedge funds, a leading comprehensive investment banks like Barclays or Morgan Stanley, or the Atlanta and Wells Fargo, which have a high presence in Atlanta. And you go down, and I feel like every name really makes sense. So they did leave footprint, and then unhappy about it. That's why they deprived the data from us. I can no longer follow them. But I thought it was a lot of fun to follow this gigantic institutional investors. Okay. No, so then you ask me, say, how do I measure the AI ownership? You know, these days research all involve huge data set. So we go from LinkedIn to Burning Glass to see each asset management, what are the people they hire. We have everybody, those institutional investors hire on the LinkedIn and Burning Glass credentials. We can see their resume, whether do they have AI credentials. Then you can back out the fact that to what extent an investor is actually AI equipped. We also look at local AI talent supply. So for example, in Atlanta, you know, you have Georgia Tech, you have Emory, you have GSU, they create a tons of technology savvy talent. And you can also infer any asset managers in Atlanta will be very fluid in the job market to recruit those talents. So there's various ways that we can measure the machine leadership of a given firm, and they all point to really very similar direction. Now, how do we trace these investors into a firm? So in the US, there is a regulation called 13F, meaning if you're institutional investor investing at least 100 million worth of US publicly traded securities, then you must file your quarter-end ownership of positions with the SEC. So with the quarter-end filing, we actually know who are the main or major shareholders of a given company. So from that end, we not only can trace out their machine downloads time, we can also trace about the AI readiness of individual investors based on how many AI credentialized talent they hire using information from LinkedIn. You can also see that all these research projects have to connect many, you know, seemingly not directly related big data set, but when you connect them, you really get very exciting and very intriguing result. Okay, so now let me spend a little bit time to explain what I meant by machine readability. Now, I supervise undergrads and graduate students all the time, and you know, when I read their essays and thesis, I say, oh, make it more readable. Okay, make it. It's not quite readable. You need to polish it to make it more readable, meaning more friendly to a reader, and the reader can grasp what you want to say without causing any mental fatigue. But when I told the students, I meant to a human reader. You need to write something that's readable to the human reader. But it turned out what is readable or pleasant to read to a human being is very different from what would be termed as readable to a machine. Okay, so we follow a pioneer scholar in this field who actually defined, quantify how machine readable a filing is. Now, there are many technical terms, but let me just put in the intuitive what those technical metrics will measure. Now, the machines really want to be able to separate tables from the text. Machines really want to be able to identify the cells, the numbers in the cells in the table, because the machines doesn't like human eye look at the boundary of the table, look at the separation table. Machine needs to be able to do that. The machine hates external exhibits. The machine doesn't want to follow a link to external source. The machine prefers every information to be enclosed in a closed searching loop. Okay, and the machine also does not like non-standard characters. Okay, so there is a statistical way to summarize and aggregate all those features, and then you can see how the filings become machine readable. Okay, so this is a aggregate trend. Now, on the vertical axis, those numbers don't make any sense because there's no natural scale for how machine readable is. So in statistics, hey, we just normalize to be a standard normal variable. So the average should be 0, okay? And the standard deviation is 1. So that's just a standard, measure, and you only see the trend, okay? So I also find this trend to be quite interesting because in the mid-2000s, you can see that all the firms are doing their upgrades to make the filing dramatically more machine readable than before. Now, you see the stalling is 2008 to 2009. That was the big financial crisis. It's also understandable during the financial crisis, probably machine readability of filing was not on the top priority of the executives. And then you see, slow growing up afterwards, but mostly very incremental progress. And this is because in the mid-2010s, our natural language processing is kind of hitting a flatter plateau. We kind of know what NLP is, and the firms all adjust to that. Now, if we will follow the new data for the large language model, we will see a new uphill movement, because these are the things that are really, really driven by technology. If the existing technology, your progress will saturate quite quickly because of competition. But when a new technology will come, we'll anticipate that all the firms will be remarching again. Okay. So we do link machine readability and machine downloads in a positive way. And that's the positive correlation that we find. So what we find is that when firms know they're more followed by machines, they also make their filings more machine readable. Now, this is not something you can do on day by day. This is due by periodical upgrades. That's what we find. Okay. So what we find is that a firm, when their machine downloads increase or escalates, then very quickly the firm filing would have a step up in its machine readability. On the background, there must be some IT upgrades, or they outsource to a specialized firms to do this. So we do observe these periodical upgrades that seem to be corresponding to the escalating level of machine readership. Okay. So one thing that we started a project, the traders, the asset managers and traders, asked me, hey, could you tell me what's the implication about the frequency of trades, the level of information dissemination? Now we know that the machine is reading those filings, because in the old days, a stock analyst or buy-side manager read the file, form an opinion. It cannot happen in seconds or minutes, right? But the machine can process the whole filing and get some aggregate feeling whether the firm is releasing a positive, negative news, or a precautionary current standing with a positive outlook. Those are the sentiment that the machine can reach in literally the split of seconds. So what we find is the following. So if you just say after a firm has a major machine readability upgrades, after they're followed by massive number of machine downloads, then what we find, those firms, if you track, we're using a data set called TAQ, TAC. Okay, so this is a database of high frequency trades. You can literally trade out every trade at the sub-second level, at the millisecond level. It's a gigantic database. Okay, so what we find is that if a firm's machine downloads is increased, say by 1 unit, 1 standard deviation, right? The number of seconds it takes for the first trade to happen after the filing is deposited on the AdGov website is 7 to 12 seconds faster. Okay, now may not be every trade is informed. Some trades are just noise. We call them noise traders. So we also look at the trades that we call the directional traders, meaning they trade in the right direction. So the price later went up, they buy, and later went down, they sell. And those trades also happen to 10 to 15 seconds higher. So there is a compelling evidence. There's a compelling evidence that the technology is actually making some investors at advantage over other investors. So, if you're a human reader, I would not suggest that you compete with those machine readers in those high frequency trading. Now, if you have some long-term views about the market, it's a different matter. For myself, I just delegate all my money to index funds. Okay, so the market makers are also taking cue of this new trend. So what we find is that if a stock is heavily followed by the machine, And right after a SEC filing is deposited on the website, the market maker will immediately broaden the bid-ask spread to protect itself, because it knows some people could process information so fast and put in a directional trade that would be at cost of its counterparts. Okay, so all these results seems to be quite consistent with what we would think if these were to happen. So so far I talked about the formatting. Mostly it's about how to set up the IT system to make the filing more machine readable. Now let me also, the next part is, let me talk about the actual writing, the content, which I think is more interesting, right? So when I supervise my students, my graduate students, to do machine processing of textual information, this is literally the task I could give them. I didn't tell them where I got this. Okay, it is actually George Washington's 1796 farewell address. Okay, so I told them, hey, I have a paragraph here. You can program up in Python, do whatever, toolbox from Google, from Microsoft, do whatever you can. Okay, now please tell me, but not using the ChatGPT. ChatGPT will tell you immediately, but just using your original coding. And tell me what the speaker wants. Okay, it's a super challenge. It's a super challenge. Okay, and in old technology, students have to cheat to go to ChatGPT to find the answer, because their own natural language processing tool would fail to tell them what exactly the speaker wants. Now, why do I point out this? I'm just pointing out that it's not always that human disadvantage over the machine, because a human being, an educated human being, would read these texts and say, wow, it's a very gracious way to bid farewell. Basically, I no longer wish to be the short-term president. Okay, but it just shows how difficult is a machine to really comprehend that meaning. Now, of course, now we have large language model, we can progress, but I think there's always room for human being. Another thing I find is interesting, in this short sentence called a concern about possible delay is unwarranted. This was the actual sentence in the 10K report. Now, this is meant to assuage whatever concern that investor will have, tell you, don't worry, things are okay. And a human being would probably interpret that way, but a machine would think it's a quadruple negative news. Because why? Because there are 4 words. It's a concern, it's a negative word. Impossible is a word that lacks confidence or conviction, of uncertainty. Delay is a negative word, and unwarranted is a negative word. So when you read this, wow, the machine will think something very bad happened. So this is just one lesson that showed that when you write, you have to read again to say, hey, what the bot will be thinking. Yes, Nicole, I have a question.
Yes, as Stephen asks, and this is sort of pertinent to what you're saying here now, Wei, what data or variables do you exclude from machine readership proxies? So
there's no data. There's no data we exclude. We basically ask the machine to process the whole 10K in this case. But everybody know that section 1 and section 7 are the most important. So that's where the majority information come from. But the machine, it's not cost the machine to read the whole thing, and the machine know to disregard irrelevant information.
So if you're responsible for putting together the filing, are there recommendations of what to include or exclude from the proxies?
No, actually, so what we would ask the machine to read whatever filings, and ask the machine to come up with the aggregate sentiment. And then we also see if with the human beings to read the key spot where we reach the same assessment. So oftentimes there is a divergence, and this example is like the most stark divergence we have seen in our example, like the concern about possible delays unwarranted. Human being think it's okay, machine give a super negative rating.
Thank you.
So I also been telling my students, when they write their resume, they should also assume that a machine is reading it. So all the principle also apply, not just the human HR, but the machine HR. Your resume need to pass the machine HR before you get to get to the next level. Okay, so I give you a old example. Now, I'm not saying this technology is still relevant today. What I'm merely to demonstrate is how human beings adapt to technology. Now, human beings adapt to a textual analysis innovation 2011, and human beings will adapt to all the future challenges. That's what I want to convey. Now, in 2011, there was a publication of a famous called a Finance Words Sentiment Dictionary. Now we have a dictionary, right? So these two people, Rockran and McDonald, they published a special dictionary to classify words in positive and negative domain, okay? But only in the finance context. It's very important. So for example, liability is one of the most frequently used words in finance because liability will occur in every single, if not anything, balance sheet, right? Left and right, okay? So we know liability is not a negative word, but liability is a negative word for most people, the majority of population in daily conversation or in daily understanding. Okay, so this is why the dictionary was published. It's important because it specified the positivity or negativity in the context of finance. Okay, so suddenly, this dictionary was fed into a lot of algorithm. It's not like people's investment decisions are dictated by this dictionary, but this dictionary start to behave like advisory and some kind of advisory role as a one more determinant or input for investment decisions. Okay, and we have checked on the website, the Man Group on EQR. Around that time, they all mentioned how they use this dictionary. So if you are a CEO, you need to pick up the dictionary, say, wow, gee, like these words are negative, or these words are positive. It's not like you always want to generate the most positive response. You just don't want to be misinterpreted or interpret the way that you don't intend. I think that's what it is. Okay. So what we find here is that there is a chart. Okay. So the red line are the firms that are heavily followed by the machines, and the blue line are the bottom one sort of firm that are not quite followed by machines. Okay. And this is somehow didn't line up the chart well, so cut down the bottom caption. I apologize that. So this is show the frequency of the usage of negative words that appear in this dictionary. Okay, so the two curves were intertwined, inseparable, and they start to diverge. And I can tell you at which point the two curves start to diverge. The two curves intersect and diverge. That point is exactly 2011. Okay, so once the dictionary became null, the company will say, hey, we should not, using these words. These words will be interpreted negative. That's not our intention. Now, we are not here to claim that all the companies or even majority of companies doing this. We just say there's enough companies doing this that would make this pattern salient. Okay, so these were the words that we observe a significant reduction in the frequency right after 2011. Okay, so the left panel show the change in frequency. Now each word is a small percentage of the total 5. Okay, so the change in frequency is very small, but the relative reduction in frequencies is big. Like correction, the user correction reduced by over 1/3. So it's destroyed, so it's closure, so it's misstatement, etc. Okay. Now, some people will say, these words could be just a fluke. People realize these words have a negative annotation to it. They avoid using it. Then how about looking at in a broader sense? So we actually also look into Lockyer McDonald, their seminal work. They actually show not only the words have sentiment, but the words also show certain tones. So they classify the following 5 tones, whether the document would suggest an litigious environment, whether the management is expressing an uncertain sentiment, whether the management want to hedge them too much, using a lot of hedging words like possibly or could, or the management too much full of themselves and using very strong words like must. Okay, so what they show is that all these tone words were associated with negative reactions to the filing by the stock market. Okay, so the management, once they know, once they're made aware of such a relation, and they reduced the frequency of those words. So that was in 2011. Now we carried the experiment again in 2018. So what is 2018? 2018 is when the Google BERT became available. So the BERT, the B is bidirectional. So Google developed this technology, then they will interpret the words with a better contextual understanding by giving the words not in one direction, but also backwards in directions, a bidirectional assessing of the context, which is a dramatic improvement over the previous one. Now, we also find if we feed the findings post 2018 into the BERT, we find they are less BERT negative than the findings previously in 2018. Okay, so for the same company or similar company. So this really show, say just technology progresses, but human beings never fail to adapt because the market competition and financial incentives are there. Okay, so the last result I want to share is really about talk. So far the title is about talk, but I've been talking about writing, but now let me think about talk about the talk, how to talk the talk. Okay, so starting from 2018, there has been a voice analytic software called LVA, became increasingly popular. Now today there are many generations post LVA. So in fact, I have junior colleagues, new professors are using this software to measure their clarity and confidence before they hit the real classroom with MBA students and BBA students, because you have to let the machine assess you. So I find it's quite interesting. Okay, so now the software has enabled a researcher to study the vocal expressions of management and the implication on the capital markets. So when I work in New York, I talk to those asset managers in Connecticut, a lot of hedge funds in Connecticut. So they were trying to use the software to assess the vocal quality of managers on top of what they write or the content of their speech, and gain a teeny little bit advantage of the investment. So they basically form investment strategies based on this and earn a little bit of extra return. Okay. Now the question would be, if the management knows that you are doing this, how should they talk differently? And the answer, they do. Okay. So this one will result on the psychology literature about called vocal quality measurement. There are two measures. One is called emotional valence, and the other is called emotional arousal. So those words, sounds weird, but they're really, the specialized jargons in the specialized jargon in the psychology literature. Okay, so the vocal quality could measure from the negative to positive, and also could be vertically ranked by active to passive. Okay. So, as a CEO, you never want to sound sad and depressed, but you want to sound, excited and happy. But the positivity and active part are different. Okay. So the positivity part is measured by valence, and activity or passion part is measured by arousal. So these two are actually quite orthogonal. They could mean different things, although you kind of want to be the Northeast quadrant. Okay. So I have, a former student who published a very nice paper. So they show that venture capitalists are more likely to invest in startups whose founders give pictures that rated high in valence arousal, conditional on whatever content, whatever projection they have. Okay, so that means the vocal quality matters. Okay, so what we find is that the management will talk with higher valence, meaning sound positive, and slightly, high arousal compared to. So if you're an entrepreneur, you need to talk with both positivity and full passion. If you're CEO, it's more important you talk with positivity, but the passion part is less important because you're running a more mature company, and people expect more positivity and accuracy rather than the pure passion, which is more important for the founding stage entrepreneurs. Okay. And the fact that we find this is fascinating is because we look at earnings, it's earnings conference, earnings call. So the actual earnings realized. So you can say, oh, the manager is so positive because the earnings are positive. No, we can control for earnings surprise, the actual earning realization relative to analyst consensus. When we control for the earnings surprise, we see that management are talking with more positivity and slightly more passion when they anticipate more machines expected in the audience. Okay. So I was given 35 minutes, and I just use up about the time. It's time to conclude. So what will we? I think we are the first research that actually documents say, hey, corporate disclosure writing speaking has already been reshaped by machine leadership, by algorithmic traders or quantitative analysts, and we certainly anticipate this would have another dramatic change now large language model becomes a new norm. Okay, so increasing AI readership will motivate firms to prepare their filings in different ways, and they formally try to cater to mostly human interpreter or human readers. So the firms have to constantly think about whether the sentiment or tone is managed properly, is adapted to the current prevailing algorithms. Okay, and I think more importantly, what I want to emphasize here is that there's always a feedback effect from technology to our behavior. We always think about how technology, help us, but we also have to understand the technology is constantly changing the game, the rule of the game, and we human beings always adapt to such a game. And I think overall, this game is a healthy one. It's promote competition and make our financial markets more efficient. So let me just stop here, and I'll welcome any questions.
Thanks, Wei. And we do have some questions for you. I want to pose mine first, and that is, how is Berkshire Hathaway's annual reports and filings changing as a result of this?
So I think that that's very interesting. So Berkshire Hathaway has not changed because it still has the annual big meeting, the big thing in Omaha, and it still attracts investors who does not view this as an algorithmic data point, but view this as a very highly characteristic long-term play. So, but I think it's still under the reign of this long-time leader, right? So I think in the near term, I don't think they will change the style. But many years down the road, I think everything needs to change.
Right.
Yeah.
Stephen asks, are we able to correlate machine readership with stock performance? And is there a positive relationship between MR and incremental stock price, EBITDA, ability to attract and retain talent, etc.?
Yes, so there is no general answer to all the questions because there are many aspects. Now, there are several results are pretty clear from our analysis. One is that the market, when the information released, suddenly the information asymmetry in the market enlarges with machines because some people can process so fast, and some people take longer time. So if you're a small investor, if you're a market maker, you need to protect yourself because information just gets impounded into stock price much faster. So to some extent, I think it's a good thing because markets become more efficient, right? And markets become more efficient in general, it's associated with generally positive real effects. Now, a separate matter is whether the AI-equipped asset managers are having an edge. And the answer is yes, except it's just like competition, the nature of competition, the edge is never long-lasting. So you can have a quick edge, but very quickly, it's a standard technology. Some people will catch up. Now, we as researchers can only capture visible available technology. So when we apply our technology, backtest your data, you get some good return, they very quickly disappear, right? But however, we know that some powerful investors, they have their private technology, which we don't know. So they're still earning the actual return. But when their technology becomes something that's available, visible to us, then we can back test it and get high return, and very quickly the high return will erode. So I think that's kind of the general pattern that's very consistent with market efficiency.
Thank you. Innocent asks, the impact of AI on employment, especially in underdeveloped countries where youth and women really need jobs. Do you want to comment on that?
Oh yeah, so I actually wrote a different paper on precisely on how technology is replacing human beings. Now, the AI displacement is very different from, say, automation. Automation displaced what I call like a lower middle class employment, and then caused the hollowing out of the manufacturing class and a lot of offshoring, etc. Now, AI is actually threatening the upper middle. So AI is threatening the upper middle. So AI is actually complementary to both certain jobs that require, like auto mechanics, welders, AI, if anything, help them in job dispatching, whatever. And AI also dramatically make some people dramatically more productive. So if you're a top doctor, okay, you give your AI assistance, you can access your judgment. You're not relying on AI, but AI give your input, increasing your information processing. They become dramatically more productive. But AI is displacing, say, entry-level engineers and entry-level this and that. So that part is dramatically displaced. But I also believe that displacement is very temporary, because we were educated not knowing this threat. Now this threat comes, wow, I'm displaced. But now we know where the technologies go. We should train and educate the next generation students in different ways for them to develop skill that's complementary to AI. So AI should make them more productive instead of they being displaced by AI.
Thank you. So back to the filings. Can firms then manipulate the machine readers? And if so, how do they go about that? And then a complementary question, at what point, so your list of organizations, a lot of them were in the financial area already. At what point do other organizations, should they be paying attention to the language they use? Or is it like, you've got to pay attention to it right now?
I think every firm should pay attention. I think the default is that sometimes your things will be, somebody will make a decision, or at least input a decision based on some machine processing of information. Now, to some extent, I also feel like we got ourselves here because when I was young, reading a 10K, I can read it. Today the 10K is like 500 pages. Just there's no way I can read it. So it's inevitable we delegate a lot of things to the machine. And now we have to ask the machine to write a more succinct version of the 10K, but the machine version is not equally liable for whatever that's not captured. I think that's kind of nuances that we're facing. Now, I must say, after I published that paper, I received a call from an entrepreneur. So the entrepreneur is setting up a firm that to pre-train the drafted disclosure. Doesn't need to be 10K. So whenever company want to show something in the open space, so they have a software to pre-train those little things and tell the corporate executive, this is how the machine could potentially interpret. Now, it's not like, as I said, the company manipulation doesn't mean I want manipulate the market to believe I'm the best in the world. Because if your stock price is overvalued, one day it will tank. It's not like everybody wants it unless you're a true fraud, right? So basically, the executives are told, this is the machine's interpretation. Is this what you intended? I think they're trying to close the gap of mispricing or misinterpretation. So I should contact that entrepreneur. He's literally setting up such a firm to do this kind of thing. I find it's quite interesting. But it also does not rule out if some executives have a very short horizon and just want the stock price to be as high as possible for the firm to be interpreted as positive possible, then they indeed could write certain things that are not liable in the human language in a court because it's human language, but could mislead machines into interpret something that's more positive than the firm actually is. So I haven't done this, but I think it's very interesting for a researcher to search such cases as well.
So does this mean that boards in the future, boards could be using AI when they're, for example, got a short list of potential CEO candidates, right? So put that that potential candidate into chat GPT type search and try and figure out what impact is candidate A going to have versus candidate B on the share price. Is that where the future's going?
So I think those exercises would become the norm, but I also feel that should not directly feed into decision. That should be one piece of information provided us for us to make sensible decision. But this information will become important because a lot of the trades are indeed recommended, are sometimes automated by the machine algorithm, and this is something you cannot avoid because there are cases. So for example, a company missed 1 digit in earnings, right? And the stock price go up, right? And then tank, right? Because those trades were just automated by algorithms. So this is an extreme example. You can also have minor versions of that. So the CEOs and boards have to be aware of such a reaction. Again, their job is not to pump up the stock price. Their job is to minimize mispricing vis-a-vis the machines.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Patrick asks, are there certain industries where you see less of a correlation with stock price?
So the fact is that the machines are actually, what we found, the machines are actually following the relatively boring companies. Okay, so in fact, all the exciting companies, they have so much retail interest. So retail investors do not follow boring companies. Retail investors follow, exciting companies. Okay, so I think to this extent, machine shares a certain wisdom with Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett say, there is no money in exciting companies. So if you really want to carve out an advantage, you need to follow underfollowed and boring companies. So I think that's actually also machine is doing. So machine is digging into very tedious, seemingly non-exciting information, but they learn something new. So it's not even industry specific. It's actually by those traits. Now the other things that the machines avoid companies close to distress, because once the distress happens, it's a very, very human process. The distress investing is the most human process in all realm of asset management. So both the startup and the distress, the two ends are very human heavy. So they would avoid companies that have a risk of financial distress.
So does that mean that Warren Buffett's now competing with the AI engines when he's thinking about investing in boring companies, and that's where the AI engines are also focused?
Yes, so I think that in that sense it is, but I think Warren Buffett and AI have a very clear specialization labor in the time frequency. So Warren Buffett is looking at very long-term, trade on long-term information. The AI is a very unique directional trading on the short horizon information.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think we've got time for one last question. And David asks, how easy is it for AI to manipulate information for disinformation?
I actually think the answer is not easy, both for AI and not easy for human to detect. And I think the second difficulty probably is a more challenging part. So the reason is that AI can write certain things. So I always put this dilemma as follows. I say, beginning, human beings write for human beings to read. Then human beings write for machines to read. Now one day will be machines write for machines to read. right? So our legal governance infrastructure is not catching up. So if the machine writes something for the machine to misinterpret, to mislead the machine, but the language per se does not violate the existing laws and rules designed for human readers, how do we judge whether a fraud or manipulation is happening? So this actually is a very fascinating new area, and I'm working also on the legal aspect of technology, RegTech and everything, because how do we hold machine and algorithm responsible? And I don't have an answer, but I will keep following it and sharing back when I have more insights.
Oh, thank you so much, Wei. I think my head's about to explode, and I'm very, very grateful that there are researchers like you in the world to try and help us figure it all out. So I'm going to hand over to Tammy now.
Thanks, Nicola. And yes, thank you, Wei. Very insightful, very thought-provoking presentation. Really great explanation or examples of how technology is constantly changing. And so thank you all for joining us. We hope that you can join us again on April the 18th. We are continuing our conversation on AI with Rajiv Garg, who is going to be talking about AI is changing the way we work. Are you ready? Please join us to find out if you are ready for the way AI is changing. And on May the 2nd, a courageous communication in female leaders with Robin Malinovich. So those are our upcoming Business Over Breakfast sessions, and we look forward to you joining us there. As Nicola mentioned, we do have some short courses that we would like for you to consider joining us for Executive Communication and Leadership Presence on April the 23rd and 24th. And if you would love to come to find out more information in person in a course at Goizueta, our Leveraging AI for Business is a great opportunity for you to get a great fundamental understanding of AI. That course is taking place on April the 30th through May the 1st in person. So for those and other courses, please check out our website or contact me in person for more information. And again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us for these sessions. We hope you have a great rest of your day and a lovely weekend. Take care. Bye-bye.